doing that ongoing work of not seeing your work as your job or your role in the organization. The sooner you can get clear about that, it helps a lot in like creating. It helps a lot in even if when you want to make pivots to do other things, where you could start seeing like all of these various things that you do as your work and not work, or your job is not your work. I'm not trying to liberate myself from a job. I'm trying to do my work, my mission, my stuff, and I want to liberate that from my employer.
Hey, Creating Maven. I'm Joy Spencer, your reframe specialist, with one important message. Your real work, it's not your job or your career. Your real work is what you create. And what you create is what sets you apart and makes you incomparable. It's your legacy. I'm here to show you a whole new way of working so you can create with your gifts, make a unique contribution, and finally get paid to be yourself. This is Reframe to Create. This is our problem, you and I. For as long as we can remember, when it comes to our understanding of work, we've thought of work as somewhere we go and not something we do. A friend's husband said this a couple of years ago, and that piqued me to this fact. He said exactly this: work is not somewhere I go, it's something I do. And I think the context at that time was just, around getting back into the office and that whole butts and seats mentality. And even in that statement right there, there's so much that he wasn't saying. Like, he didn't say work is not somewhere I go, it's who I am. He didn't say that. He said it's something I do. And I want to just dig deeper into this idea and its contrasts. On the one hand, the difference between thinking of work as somewhere you go versus thinking of it as something that you do. And yet still, I want to think about a third contrast, a third way of thinking of it as something that you are. So 3 different ways: work as somewhere that you go, work as what you do, and work as who you are. I see the first and the last one as the 2 extremes of 2 different generations. Historically, people have thought of work as somewhere you go. Cue the butts and seats mentality and the fight to get everyone back into the office no matter what. Cue the idea that management means keeping a close eye on people to make sure that they're doing their work. Cue the idea that people can't possibly be working at all if they work remotely. These are some of the downsides to this view, right? But it's not even the biggest one, which I think, I'll share, and we'll get to that. And I think it's, and these are downsides regardless of what generation you're in. I'll tell you about that shortly. But first, it's not all downside. There are a couple of upsides to thinking of work as somewhere that you go, right? Like, how many of you have parents who just never really talked about work or work drama? Work was somewhere they went. They did the work, they got the paycheck, and then they left the work at the job and came home to get on with their lives. When work is somewhere you go, you can do this. You can live this way. You can go there, do the thing, and leave it there. Clean break, less fuss, less muss, no drama, less angst. Now let's talk about the other extreme. The work is who I am, that crew. It's a way of looking at work that my friend's husband never claimed, but that we all know someone, maybe even we're that someone who lives that way. I was talking about this with EJ the other day. EJ from episode 42, Creating Your Way to Freedom. And we were trying to understand why our generation can get so worked up about work and wrapped up in work and really get out of balance. And she said it's because we got sold the idea of making a difference and having an impact. And what's more human than that? And wow, I had to back up and catch my breath on that one. Isn't that the truth? When we're talking about work in those big, meta, deeply universal human desire terms, it's no wonder that we get so emotionally invested, buried, and even sometimes completely lost in our work. Work can feel like this is who I am. Our very sense of self, our very sense of identity can get wrapped up in our work if we see this as the way, as the place where we're going to have that impact, to leave a legacy and do something that really matters before we die. And especially if we feel like this is the only place. And this brings me to the biggest downside that I said I was going to get to. The biggest downside to seeing work as somewhere we go and not something we do. The idea that this place, or that there is this place, this single place, this idea that your organization, as it is physically or metaphysically located as a thing, is a place where your work belongs, a place that you go to do your work, or a place that is the source and generator of work. This idea is that work is something attached to jobs and organizations, so that if you're not working in a job at an organization, or if you're not in a career, then you're not working. Your work just sort of poof, disappears. It ceases to exist. This idea anchors your concept of what work is to organizations. It locks it down within them. It sort of means that your work has been captured. It's like the job is a container and work is a glass figurine that is placed in that container. And you're afraid that if you take the figurine out of the box, out of that container, it won't just break, it will cease to exist. But what if that's not true? What if work is something that you do regardless of where you are? And what if what you do isn't the sum totality of who you are? What if? Imagine that. You're reaching into the box. Do you see yourself taking out that figurine? Now it's in your hand. And you're walking around to wherever you want, building on it, taking it apart, reconfiguring it, and building it again. Whatever you want. If you see this, then you've got it in you to conceptualize this idea that I want to talk about today. The idea of liberating your work. And I'm not talking about remote work. I'm not talking about being able to work from wherever you want, which of course can be a part of it, but that's not the main thrust. It's not about where you work or where your work sits physically. It's about ownership. It's about who you really believe owns your work. So let me ask you, who do you believe owns your work? Does it belong to your job? Or does it belong to you? What is your work? You may think you know what you believe, but you might not believe that at all. You might believe the complete opposite. Consider this. If you think your work belongs to your job, then you'll see work as tasks, objectives, and key results you're aiming for that are inherently and inextricably interwoven and attached to a role in an organization. You'll see your responsibility as being productive in that role and hitting milestones and certain achievement points. And in the event that you lose that job or leave it, you'll consider yourself out of work. You'll think of yourself as not working right now, and you'll hustle to get yourself, quote unquote, back to work. But what if you think about your work as belonging to you and something that you do? What if you see it as something that belongs to you the way your hand belongs to you? It's yours, and you get to do with it, build with it, and create with it. It's something that is always with you and accessible to you. You'll see your work not as something that your job or your role in your organization gives to you, but what you do and what you give to yourself and to them. You'll see that your work is what you create and that you always have your gifts with you, so you always have the ability to generate your work. You'll know that your work is not something you need permission to do by way of having a job. You'll have liberated your work. Okay, Joy, you're probably thinking, where are we going with this? Let's say, I'm able to do this or get on this bandwagon of liberating my work. What does it actually mean? And what does it actually look like? Well, to dig into this, I knew I needed someone to help me do exactly that, look into it deeper and look in and unpack it. So I invited my guest from episode 34, Feeling Your Way to Your Next Job, to come back to help us wrestle through this. Sawida Kamara is in the building, y'all. To start, I asked her what came up for you when you heard what I just shared about liberating your work.
This is my present journey. Like it's something I'm working through, where I'm coming from a space where I've designed something like a way of work and a way of doing something that I feel is mine. But because I was doing it at a place that was where I worked, I was feeling like, one, I needed to give myself, I was realizing I didn't give myself permission to see, like, you can do that anywhere that's yours. So that was the first thing, was like, whoa, wait, I don't know why I had, but I was still not really fully giving myself permission to, like, this is yours. You get to take it wherever you go. But then the second thing was, I had a thought, was like, well, then who wants this? Who wants what I got?
Mm.
And that's really where I'm working through. It is a part of reclaiming that what you have is yours first, and then realizing like the journey is wherever it's needed, it's needed.
What is it that you think gets us so attached to this idea that our work and what we do belongs to the organizations that we do it in and only them, that sort of leads us to this sort of difficulty of imagining ourselves doing it somewhere else, or even in a way where we're the ones taking the charge, taking the lead, and being like, hey, this is a body of work that I do, versus, hey, do you have a role for me that I could come get into, and then I do this thing here? What is that?
Well, that's the dance we were all set up for. You looked for something to do. You applied for a job to do a thing. And then many of us had to do those things. Like we've had to say, okay, I applied for this job, therefore I have to do the things. A lot of us have not had these opportunities to come to something where there may have been a job description, but ultimately what you were creating was something you had to literally create. So I think that's part of when you get, sometimes if that's what your experience was, you didn't really have to create, in that you were creating, but your job in and of itself and what you were doing wasn't an act of creation. You were more like just pouring yourself into something. Then it makes you feel like, it almost makes you forget that you're creating. It's a dichotomy of, did I actually create the thing that I'm doing, or did I apply a job, get a job, and now I have an opportunity to do something because they're paying me to do it.
Mm-hmm. So it's like, versus like, was there a container that was here when I got here?
Mm-hmm.
There was a prescribed thing. Here were the, ABC steps.
Yeah.
And I'm just sort of following this model. If your role feels more like that, it's probably more difficult to see all the ways in which you are generating something new and creating something new in there. Versus if you have a role where you either created the role or you are creating new things, projects and products or something in the role, it's easier for you to think, yeah, I did that. And now I'm going to go do that thing somewhere else.
And I think that for some of us also, we have seen work in this transactional way. Like I'm doing something in exchange for something. So that sometimes takes people out of the fact that they see it as theirs, because someone is paying you to do it. So somehow along the way, but I also, I question, it's like such an interesting thing, because if I was a painter and I was commissioned to do a piece of art, I would still see it as my art. So it's an interesting thing. Or if I was a choreographer and I was commissioned to produce some kind of work of, art, a dance, I wouldn't see it as no longer mine. I don't know if it's field specific, but there's just something there that I'm like, some of us are, it might be about where we work and the places with work, and we don't see it as artistic endeavors or creative endeavors. So we stop thinking of it as our work, as belonging to me.
Yeah, I think it's a number of things. I do think it's just the general way we come to work and the messaging that we get about work and jobs and organizations, like go get a job. Just even that word, go get a job, go out, go away from yourself, go to this place that's going to give you this thing. You're already from the jump assuming that it's something that you don't have and that they have and that they're giving to you. So that's already your baseline. But then if you get into it and you're not creating anything there, that further compounds that sense. But let's say you're like, go get it, you go get a job, and then you create within that space. I think that's where the opportunity for power becomes for you. And I know that that's been a source of power and awareness raising for me, where I've been like, oh, I'm creating this. And I know that I'm the one creating it, and I know it comes from me. It's helped me to then that next step sort of say, oh, well, where else can I do this? So creating that first step of creating where you are is, I think, what gives you the possibility and opportunity to begin to possibly even think that your work can be liberated out of this space. And once you've done that, then it seems like you're on that next step where the question is like, oh, well, who wants this? And but it's sort of like where you're failing to think about realizing that it's like somebody already does want it because you're already doing it in the space that you are. So I guess the question is, who else
Yes.
wants this, right? And you already have a proof of concept in the place that you are.
That's a better question. I like that. Who else? Because that I think ultimately that is what I am
Yeah.
exploring or figuring out, is who else wants this. Proof of concept is a big thing when you can, if you feel like the thing you are doing or you want to continue doing or liberate to yourself and say, this is what I'm offering out there to the world. Doesn't matter who pays me to do this. Then it is kind of like, well, who else is, who else wants this? Also, I just kind of thought about, like, to the previous question of like, why do we feel like this is their work, the transactional thing. But also, I think some of us come from worlds and societies where we're always trying to contribute to the larger stuff, and we do a lot of like, well, this is part of the larger thing. So it sometimes, I think, that helps, that makes people forget that it's theirs too, when we're always seeing that our work is about advancing a larger cause or whatever, which is, I think that's why a lot of us do what we do, because maybe that's what we believe. But I think at some level, it might be part of like our, like, we get lost into the larger causes, and we over identify with like where we work and their mission and what they're doing. And we stop forgetting that I have a personal life mission. I have a personal thing that I'm here to contribute. And therefore my part of my mission is I need to be giving what is my gift and putting it out there. It isn't meant to just stop at where I work, but we've been sold, come be here. You know, I won't say a tagline that I recently heard, but there are places where they appeal to people. And I think people forget, like, that you may have a personal mission. It's not about aligning with an organization's mission. What is your mission? What do you add value to, full stop, that makes you valuable, important, essential part of this world? Forget who else, like, I think there's an aspect of this which is like, we forget ourselves because we're so busy trying to be a part of someone else's thing.
I like that you brought up mission because, I had Samuel on, and that was what we were talking about, like following your mission, being mission minded in your work, not just thinking about your work as, oh, this job I'm doing, this career that I'm doing, this is a place I come and I'm parking my car and I'm trying to stay here as long as possible. But when you're mission minded and you're like, you have the broader body of work that you're here to do, which comes from an understanding of what your gifts are, what you create, and how that's a unique contribution. And then now you're like, okay, the jobs, the careers become temporary vehicles for that. They have a specific timeline. You might not, prescribe it right from when you go in, but it just sort of changes your whole orientation about how you go into a space, the value you believe that you offer, the thing that you're there to do, and do it and move on and do it wherever next the mission calls for you to do it. It's a different way of thinking about your work. And you have to own your work there. That requires such a high level of ownership and responsibility and thinking and responsibility to think things through and to think at a deeper long-term level versus next job, or what's the next step on this career track. It requires and challenges you to do and be and show up in a much more intentional and deeper way. And I think that's a scary prospect too for people in a way, or it's just not something that people have thought about. Something that's been helpful for me is being a consultant. And so even as an OD consultant, internal to an organization, just the way that a consultant shows up as, we own the body of work. We have our skill sets, our tools, and we're coming into different business, if for my case, business units within an organization, and that ability to you come in with your things and you're offering what you offer, and but also having our own mission is the mission of an OD, right? It's about making organizations more effective and making change better, which is not necessarily that's not the mission of the business unit we're going to, but they are going to benefit from what it is that we bring to the table. And so us being true to our mission helps and serves them. And even though it's not the same overarching mission necessarily. And so having that consultative mindset, I think helps to own your work and know that this is mine and I can take it with me and others will value it and need it, really.
Employers have also set up a paradigm where they're saying things like you have to sign this NDA or non-compete or these things. And so to me, part of it is like there's a level of, I don't know where this comes from, but a level of being able to steal people's genius and make it yours. And I think people also, that creates fear, and it creates a sense of this thing around my work belongs to my where I work, because some people have literally set that up into like the writing. Even as a consultant, I've been in a consulting group where if I went off and did my own thing, or even like I wasn't a full-time consultant with them, I couldn't work with one of their clients. I think it was like 3 years. But even the individuals who wanted, like, they want to continue and work with you in some way, shape, or form. But here is this rule that it's like, oh, come back to us, come back to the consulting group.
Even though the consultant is no longer there.
Consultant is no longer there, and they want to work with this person, but it's almost like a version of like blocking your ability to work with it. So it's such an interesting thing because it's playing out on both sides of the fence. It's keeping a client feeling like they can't continue relationships with a consultant beyond where the person was employed, which is also very strange.
Well, I mean, that should clue us into that what we're doing and what we're offering is very valuable and very powerful, that organizations go to this type of extent to, as you said, I don't know how you described it, stealing your genius,
Locking it away.
locking up your genius, and sort of like, ooh, it's very exploitative and extractive way of operating. But yeah, and I hope that as people are listening to it, they're sort of getting the insight and thinking about their work and what they do and how they can have that sense of like what you offer is extremely valuable. All of your years of experience and your skills, but not just that, but like just who you are and what you bring to the table and the uniqueness of your story and all the things that make you who you are and how you work is incredibly valuable. And we need to learn how to exploit our own selves better. Right? Like organizations have figured out how to set up systems to leverage that, through, all the things that come together for their organizations, for their mission, and to the degree in which we get better at knowing and understanding our value, being able to accurately tell that value story to wherever else we want to share that, whether it's through consulting, whether it's as a small business, whether it's through creating a product for our own and ourselves, and like creating and pulling income through that, being paid to be ourselves through that. I think this is important work, and I don't think, especially in this economy and this climate and the world that we're in, I don't think the excuse that, oh, I don't know, I can't figure it out, I don't think that stands anymore. I don't think that holds water anymore. Like it's time to figure it out. Take the time, however long it takes to figure this out, because we are literally leaving incredible value and money on the table by being captured solely.
I mean, I think there was one of the things you had in your like the pre conversation, like in the notes, like just how people feel like the hustle we have when we don't have a quote unquote job, to get back to work. And if you didn't see yourself as losing something, if it always was yours, I don't even think most people would, that hustle or that frenzy wouldn't feel the same way for them. I think they would be like, oh, maybe they would roll with it a little differently around, it wouldn't probably come from a maybe motivated by fear or loss of value. Now I'm not contributing. It's like, no, I have something to offer. okay, for whatever reason, I've parted way with my previous employer. Either you left, they laid you off, they fired you, whatever. But it's just this idea that something left, or and you need to go back to it or get something. Like, it's this, even all of that hustle grind type thing. It makes people forget that there's more to this than just like, I work. We all have things we want in life, and I am working towards an end of like the rest of my life. I have other things I want to do, out quote unquote, other things I want to do, and the work quotes around that helps me do that. But I don't I there's something about the valuation, like how it hits us personally, to be quote out of work or not at work. Even people who have jobs, and people feel guilty about taking vacations.
It's an identity thing.
Yeah.
It's an it's the ways in which jobs have become the way that people define themselves.
Yes.
And the only way, right? And I'm not saying, oh, don't work, or like, yes, we're like, it's not going to be working anymore. No job, down with jobs. It's not that. It's really questioning this way of centralizing your identity on jobs, on specific type of jobs, roles, specific roles and statuses within specific types of jobs, and just how not having a job translates to people being like, I'm not working, or I'm not contributing anything automatically, and therefore I am worthless, valueless, and I got to get back real quickly as I can to this job. It's more than just money for people. It's like, it's more than just, oh, I got to pay the mortgage, I got to pay this, so I need this income coming in. It's really an existential crisis a lot of times, and that's sort of what I'm getting at. Challenging that underlying belief that's there, that's really common, it's pervasive, but very, very toxic. This is where I asked Sawida to get specific on what this looked like for her, and I want you to also think about it for yourself. What does liberating your work look like for you? Think about it. What does it look like to have an understanding of work, of your work, that's separate from your understanding of your job? For Sawida, even though the idea is still a work in progress, it's taking shape because she's clear on her values and how she wants to work. So I ask you, are you clear on your values? How much time have you put into getting clear on your values and exactly how you want to work? Not just what work you want to do, but how you want to work. Sawida shared that, like many of us, she's looking to figure out how to get into this multiple streams of passive income game. And what's very important to her is being able to work in organic teams to leverage partnerships in a different way. She's done the solo consultant thing and knows that's not how she wants to work. She still wants to work in partnerships for all the benefits of ideating and collaborating with others, but in a way that doesn't get tainted by what happens when we're in hierarchical organizations. It's a delicate balance of being together with others while also being independent. She expressed a clear desire to do the great work that she does with many more people in more spaces than her organization itself wants to do. And it got us into a very interesting discussion about how organizations are not truly mission-minded in the way that we, Sawida and I, think of being mission-minded, because they're in competition with each other. Think about it. How many organizations do you know or have you been a part of that are interested in being partnered with other organizations in their ecosystem so that they can band together to make positive change and impact together? Not many, especially if they're corporate. Sometimes, even if they're nonprofit, they're in competition. Competition is so deeply embedded, even in these types of organizations, nonprofits, that it impacts how they treat their employees, which is why they try to lock them down, lock their brains down and their ideas down. So this conversation helped us to get clear again about the reason why we want to liberate our work. It's not just for ourselves, but to help the work that we do to be able to get to a wider audience and to be in service to more people and more spaces, even if the inclination of our organizations is not to partner or collaborate in that same way, but to be competitive and scarcity minded. That doesn't mean that we have to be that way. We're looking to work in a different way so that we can truly have a positive impact and support the broader missions we care about. This is why I say your work is not your job or your career. You have to take on the responsibility of discovering what this means for you specifically. What is your work? And when you find it, you don't have to do it as a lone wolf. You don't have to compete or feel like you have to buy out and squash out everyone else in the market. There's room for all. You can take up space without feeling like you have to take up all the space. You can take up space in a way that allows you to find and join hands with others who you find traveling down the same road as you on the same mission. But this whole idea may not be for everyone, and I understand that. And Sawida had great advice on this.
Liberate it to the point of your comfortability. I have been a consultant. I've done solo things. I've learned a key thing. I don't want to be solo. So bring along the lessons that you've learned about yourself into this when it comes to liberating your work. Know, again, what is also some of your bottom line. Like I'm not married. I don't have children. So I'm not going to liberate my work and then I have daycare. Like this, like let's liberate at the level of like what's common sense too.
Mm-hmm.
And also it doesn't mean that, again, like Joy, you've already said this, it's not like you don't want to work anymore or you wouldn't work for someone anymore, but just be thoughtful about like when you're doing this work, are you free in doing it in terms of your energy? Is this what you want to do? Is this how you would do it? Are you working? Are your gifts truly at your disposal? Or are you just, I just got to get a paycheck? Nothing is wrong with any of this. It's just checking back into like, how liberated are you in this? And there's some of us who want to be just way more liberated in this. Like, I'm comfortable with and knowing that when I make those decisions, I wouldn't be impacting anyone really but myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ultimately.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
It's not one or the other, right? Now we say this to
yeah.
people like you don't have to leave your job, you don't have to go become an entrepreneur or business owner if that's not what you're interested in. But when you're thinking about creating, that's what needs to no longer be an option that you're like, oh, I don't create. I'm just here. I'm just dotting I's, crossing T's here in this job. And I'm like, no, you have this whole other part and aspect of you. Do it, paid, free, whatever, but this is a responsibility. Find a way to be about that, and that's a way that you can sort of live in two worlds. Like you may have this thing that you're in 9 to 5, but you also have this other way of showing up that is maybe part of your work's not liberated, but maybe another part of it is, where you're like, well, you've answered those two questions, or you're clear on those two things, that I create these things, that there's more where that came from. I'm these are my gifts, and these are things that I can bring to the table. And then there are other people and other places and spaces that would want this and that value this. And I'm going to be about sharing and offering it in those other places and spaces as well, not just in this singular place. I think it just does something for you mentally. I know it does for me as well, about my level of engagement and investment in any particular place. It just always gives me this broader, big picture view of what it is that I do. I'm not just doing a job and doing a thing, fulfilling a role in an organization. I am very mission minded about the gifts that I have to offer and how I want to have an ability to do the things in all the other places. So it's not ownership for selfish reasons. It's not ownership or liberating your work just so that you can, liberate your work. For me, it's about being able to be more impactful in more and other places and spaces, which I think when people get stuck in jobs and thinking that that's the only place that their work belongs, makes them very narrow-minded and means that we all miss out on it. We're missing out on so many people who have so much to offer because they're only doing it and operate in a way that they only have the energy to do it in this one space. So it's liberation for the benefit of other people as well.
100%. Like part of my motivation was, I was like, oh, I would want to do this for other organizations. I want the opportunity to work with a small community-based nonprofit in another country. I just do. What we're doing and the work that is being, quote, done is impactful work. But if I leave it at just where I work, I won't get to do that. Like, I'm not satisfied with just that. So part of me liberating my work is really more like liberating my time to do other things that so more of what I do really authentically. I don't know where that would take shape, but I'm very clear, which is I want to do more of this, and I want less boundaries around how it's done and who it benefits. And, because a lot of is towards a specific end goal, which is an honorable end goal, that the mission of my organization, which I think is wonderful. But I've always even personally been like, well, we serve certain kinds of nonprofits. We don't work with social entrepreneurs. Even that has been a question for me from the entire time that I've been working there, because I actually think social entrepreneurs need this same support. So I want to be liberated to follow through on that. I don't want to just, I don't want, that's what the impulse is about, is that there's more that I see beyond the way we do things where I quote work. And there's more that I want to impact than just what we do at work. Their mission is not my life mission, it's their mission. I'm very clear about what I see would be the impact and the contributions I want to make through my energy and my time, this thing called work. I don't want to bottle all that up and just put that on the shelf over here and like, well, they're doing it. I work here, I'm doing commendable work. Because even in that, it's like, yeah, I have people, accolades. You got people, thank you for this great work. But it's like, there's still an aspect of me that is like, thank you, wonderful, but I want to do more. And I know I wouldn't be able to turn this entire organization around to see it my way. So I want to liberate it from that thing that I want to do. I got to do it a different way, and I'm giving myself permission to do that, which for me is translated into, well, I'm moving into a part-time status with where I work so I can free up my time. That's a choice I can make for myself, because I understand my financial needs, and like I'm planning for it. But it is very much this idea of I have a larger view of my contributions and where my gifts go. I have a larger view of that. And so I don't see my gifts as exclusively I bring them to where I work.
So yeah, I think we've hopefully pulled out and teased out the idea in a way so that people see, like, when you think of work as somewhere that you go, like to a job, to a place, and that's where the work happens, and the only place that it happens, it locks you into that. But if it's something that you do and it's in your hands, then it can go with you anywhere that you want to go, and it can be part of your experience of exposing yourself to fulfilling the mission, which I hope people are thinking more about, being mission minded, fulfilling the mission in anywhere and all the different places that could use it and that could take you. And I see it as liberating your work to serve more, liberating your work to serve a broader audience, to serve all the people who you could potentially serve that won't get that service because you're sort of like locked in and hemmed in. So how can people start doing this in some way or some small way? Like, what's been key for you to start making this shift in a practical sense?
I've focused more on the results. Part of this was really thinking through the results, what the benefits, like what my work creates in others' lives, in others' organizations. And I got very clear about, like, that's linked to me. And I know that seems super like, it's not selfish or self-centered, but it is like this thing of like, I had to start really thinking about some things are inherently or inextricably mine. I've worked with enough organizations to know, like, this is these things, these results, these experiences, what they're saying is because it's a way I'm choosing to operate and work in partnership with them. Yes, we have the evaluation data, the outcomes. We're trying to make it the organizational level, but how people feel about the experience and what they're sharing with me and how these relationships persist. I had to start holding that as like, that's yours, Sawida. And so you get to recreate that with anyone. It's a very interesting thing because our testimonials are worded in a way about insert my organization's name. Partners say this about their partnership with this organization. No, they said that about me.
Yes.
That's what that testimonial actually says. And to start like being confident in that and seeing that as your thing.
So owning the impact that you're able to have,
Owning
owning the results, and that takes looking at that part of your work. Like, what is the impact that I've had? What have I created? What are the type of experiences that I've created in the people who I work? What do people say about me? What have I brought to life? And then knowing that, oh, I did that, and I can do that again.
Sometimes that's not the milestones that your organization cares about. So you have to find it's the impact that is valuable to you. Be very distinguishing from I did good, I got the gold star because I helped them hit like the milestones my organization finds valuable. I'm talking about truly what these people say about how you impacted them or how your work and what you do impacts them. Even if you don't know that, take yourself on a listening tour personally to people you've worked with, those you serve, find out what they get from working with you so that you can start having in your mind how your gifts are received and what they create in others. Because sometimes we just know we have a gift, but we don't fully know like the full circle of it. Like, you know, so that I just wanted to add that because I think sometimes the achievement points or the milestones are the organizations, but get clear about what are the achievement points and the milestones, the things are the results that are yours, that are most valuable for you to know about yourself.
I think that's such an important distinction to make because a lot of times that's another way in which we get lost in organizations because we have things that we value and what we want to bring to the world, but the organization may not value that. And so we also then are like, oh, I guess it's not valuable. It's like, no. That's not true because yes, maybe for the time that you're here, you want to hit these things that they value, but that doesn't mean you want to neglect your values or your mission to the degree in which, and I'm not saying this like you're probably not working in an organization that's absolutely antithetical to all the values that you have, but all the values may not complement, and there might be some different things that I know that's for me. There are different things that I value deeply that my organization is not as interested in, just for various reasons. It's still very important, and I know that it's valuable elsewhere in other places, and I'm not willing to park that for the however number of years until I move on, or even to hope to find another organization that does that. Right now, I'm taking charge of like, no, there may never be an organization that perfectly fits all of these things. I'm still responsible to live this thing out, being mission minded, and still responsible to really operate at that level of value. So thank you so much for that first and important point about like being more aware, doing a listening tour of some sort, really dig into what is the impact, what's the value that those others are getting from what you're doing, and what impact has that had on you to sort of see that and experience that and be exposed to that? What's the impact been on you?
That was very helpful because it actually lit a fire under me a little bit more to be like, oh, okay, well, that's a thing. Like it's not happenstance. It's actually I got like it's repetitive, and so it helped me say, okay, this is. It helps you hone in on what is your work, meaning also like your impact. The other thing that has when I like, how can you think about liberating your work? I think part of this is you always touch on this, like doing that ongoing work of not seeing your work as your job or your role in the organization. You always got to is the earlier the sooner you can get clear about that, it helps a lot in like creating, and helps a lot in even the if when you want to make pivots to do other things, where you could start seeing like all of these various things that you do as your work and not work or your job is not your work. You say this like, that's not when I'm using my work, I don't mean my job. We're using the same words, but it does not have the same meaning. I'm not trying to liberate myself from a job. I'm trying to do my work, my mission, my stuff, and I want to liberate that from my employer. Because I'm very clear that that's not me. That's the role, that this, that, that's not me.
And that's not you either, my creating maven. Your job is not you. We're on a journey to be about our work and take very seriously the responsibility of being about the mission that we're each here to do. Always remember this. Your work is not your job or your career. Your job, your career, they're just temporary vehicles through which you can live out your mission for a time. But they aren't the only vehicles out there for you to do this. Your mission can be lived out in volunteer work, in a business, in a side hustle, or in all of these ways, in a little way, all at the same time. It's different for everyone. But what we can't do is abdicate responsibility to do the work of figuring this out. We can't abdicate our work to our jobs. We have to liberate our work from our employers in our minds to begin with, and maybe later in some other physically lived out way so that we can be about the bigger things that we're here to be about. Whew, we've done a lot today. We talked about why liberating your work is so important, and Sawida even gave us some great tips to get us started, like get clear on your impact. What are the results you bring about for people? We talked about values and why it's so important to remember what yours are. And remember, it may not necessarily overlap completely with all the values and the mission of the organization that you're in, and that's okay. That's why you want to go back to episode 32 with Samuel Sarafel and learn all about why you need to work your way out of your job and do that by being mission-minded. Remember, your job is your proof of concept. You don't need any more proof. What you do is valued in the market. Now it's time to find other places and spaces that also want what you have to offer. This doesn't have to mean leaving your job or starting a business. You can find partners and develop work partnerships right now, today, with other organizations and collaboratives that are aligned to your mission. This is about ownership and responsibility. If your work only gets done in this one job, it's captured. Liberating your work sounds like moving yourself beyond this. This is not for everyone, but if this is for you, know that we've just scratched the surface today. And by now, you're probably chomping at the bit for more practical tips on how you can do this. Well, never fear, my creating maven. That's what we're going to do in episode 57. Build and diversify your work portfolio. This is the how of liberating your work, and I'm going to take you through it step by step next time we gather. In the meantime, try this on for size. Take Sawida up on her advice and go on a listening tour between now and when episode 57 drops. Ask folks you've worked with before what the impact of the work you've done with them has been on them, and take copious notes. It's the solid foundation for the work we'll be doing next. And of course, remember that sharing is caring. So share this episode with at least one other person and invite them to join us on the journey by following Reframe to Create wherever they listen to their podcasts. See you soon, Creating Maven. Until then, remember to always ask yourself, what will I create?